Hello everyone, welcome back for week 10 of our course where we're going to focus on some hands-on materials, specifically looking at how learners are going to be engaging with our learning materials. This is part of our development portion of the course where our objectives are to generate some different types of instructional materials, and today we're going to talk about those hands-on materials. Now, there are a lot of different ways we can use hands-on materials in the classroom. Today we're going to focus on just a few educational strategies. We're going to talk about show and tell. We're going to talk about using these materials as cognitive aids, at doing artistic expression with these materials, investigations, and finally using these hands-on materials to practice different skills. Okay, starting off with show and tell, this is a very basic strategy, but it's very useful when we want to have students explore the dimensions of an object, or when we want them to be able to investigate something in person. This is useful if you're trying to learn the size and weight of an object. Maybe the object has a certain smell or noise when you knock on it, or maybe hold a seashell up to your ear, that sort of thing. Ideas like density or hardness, right, is really hard to describe, but much easier to understand in person if you're holding that, in this case, a geode, right, or a rock in your geology class. As far as examples, okay, really basic show and tell might be just passing an object around the class that we're learning about that day so students can investigate it. Visiting a historical site or visiting a zoo, right, visiting a location to learn about the dimensions of an object or a creature in the case of a zoo. Also, we can do some of this in virtual reality. Maybe you're attending an art gallery in VR. Right? That's not really a hands-on material per se, but it still helps us explore the dimensionality of the object in that first-person view, right? Which is still powerful and a lot of educational upside with virtual reality as we get better and better in that area. And next up, cognitive aids. Sometimes we can use these hands-on materials as ways to help us understand something, to understand relationships. So these cognitive aids can help us use manipulatives to model relationships. I know this is really popular in math education. Okay, on the left there, you see some algebra tiles, and they're actually organized in such a way that it models factoring. Okay, this is x plus 2 times x plus 2 here in our picture. Okay, but we can use these manipulatives to model all sorts of relationships in education. They might just be a reference material for the students. Students might have to organize the manipulatives or sort them or balance them in order to test those relationships. Some other examples other than the algebra tiles, you might have ABC or counting blocks. Okay, something as simple as having the student organize the blocks in order is going to help them cognitively understand their ABCs or counting. Things like 3D geometric shapes. Okay, if we're sorting those by their different properties, that's really going to help students learn about those shapes. There's also things like pictures or flashcards. Okay, I've seen a lot where you have different pictures or cards on the table, and the student's job is to organize them or sort them in different ways based on the lesson, right? There's a lot of power in that, and being able to manipulate things and move things around in the real world. And that's how we can use those tools as cognitive aids. Next up, artistic expression. Okay, this is a great way to help people understand something, is to have your students build a creative representation of something they're supposed to understand. Right? In order to be able to do this, they need to understand the different parts of the model, the different dimensions and relationships between all the pieces and how that plays into it, so that they can create something semi-accurate, right? So artistic expression is a great way to help people understand something at a higher level, help them work through that by creating something creatively. Some different examples: creating a model like the cell model here on the right, creating a drawing or painting of something that's occurring or something they're learning about, or maybe writing and acting out a skit. are all great examples of how we can use kind of that artistic expression in the real world to better understand a concept or idea. Another way to incorporate real-world objects and hands-on materials is through investigations. Okay, teaching students to investigate aspects and relationships of these different objects. This can be done by measuring things, by observing interactions, and of course, recording those observations. It sounds probably a lot like the scientific method if you have a science background, and that's why we have this take in a lot of science labs, right? Where you're essentially measuring something, you're observing what's going on, and you're recording it, right? So that's very useful to get students to understand different phenomena about the world. Let's measure it, let's observe it, let's record it, right? That's a great way to learn. Another example, engineering site surveys. Maybe you have students go to a site and they have to measure different things so that they can solve some problem, right? It's a great way to use those hands-on measuring tools to learn more about the world. And a lot of this can also be extended into that virtual world when we're talking about measuring different things and then observing what happens. Okay, the VR simulations, we're still working kind of on that content and the amount of educational content out there, but wouldn't it be great if you could measure some details, build your own bridge, and then observe what happens as that truck drives over it, right? And that's kind of, I think, the future we're working towards in the VR realm. And finally, we have skill practice, which is probably the most obvious use of these real-world tools and manipulatives. When we want to get our hands on the actual tools whenever possible when we're doing skills. And we want to practice those skills with equipment. Okay, so this might be real world tools. You're practicing the use of a hammer to drive in nails into a board. This might be about utilizing props or specialty equipment, like a CPR dummy in a CPR class. Okay, it's not safe to practice on an actual human, so we have specialty equipment made so that we can practice this specific skill. Some other examples, we talked about the CPR dummies. In the military world right now, they do training called simunitions, which is essentially kind of paintball practice. Or, in sports, you might have cones and equipment that you need to practice these different drills. Okay, we don't want you to hit your teammate every single play, so we use a big blocking shield or pad instead. But these are all examples of when you would use these kind of real-world hands-on tools to practice something, right? Either using the real tool itself or using some kind of equipment as a stand-in, right? That really helps the students practice that skill and kind of isolate that area. All right, that's all I have for you guys this week. I wanted to keep it a little shorter since I know we're still working on Project 3. Remember, for Project 3, you're creating that training material for a short lesson. There's the rubric there if you've forgotten. Remember, that's due next Monday, so please let me know if you have any questions. But no extra resources this week, no practice tests. I just want you guys to wrap up that Project 3, so I'm going to give you some time to work. But that's all I have for you today, so have a great week.